I want to share an approach that may just change how you view spirituality. This approach is based on a three-step initiation process outlined by Rudolf Steiner, who was a mystic in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Rudolf Steiner emphasized the grip that materialism would have on the world at large, and how this would take us further and further away from spirit unless we are able to lift ourselves out of materialism by realizing and transcending it. And nowadays, spirituality is becoming more and more trendy, but people are approaching it from a purely materialistic perspective. So, I want to take a step back and discuss what spirituality is, how spirit is beyond matter, and how viewing it from a purely materialistic perspective is bound to lead to a misconception. This will change how you view spirituality because you'll see that it's not about doing anything on the physical plane, but more about controlling your thoughts and emotions. I've studied numerous spiritual teachings for the past 10 years, and I grew up in a Christian household. But in the last year and a half, spiritual science has completely changed the way I view spirituality. And for my own inner work, I went from straight winging it to having concrete steps and a solid system to follow. Spirituality is not a part time gig. You can't be spiritual during the week and turn it off on the weekends. No, it affects the deepest part of you and constantly challenges you. That's why you hear about shadow work or inner work. It's confrontation with everything that you haven't worked out for yourself. And it's not all fun and games. Yes, you'll see the good, but you'll also see the bad and ugly, and it's all amplified. The very word spirituality means the expressing of spirit. So, when approached from a material perspective, it's already misconceived. By very definition, spirit is beyond matter. So you can't experience spirit with a purely materialistic mindset. And we live in a materialistic society, which is fine. But when we treat spirituality in that same way as things of the natural world, it's bound to be erroneous. You see, the physical world is a reflection. That's why in Hinduism we have the expression all is Maya, which means all is illusion. The world that we know to be true is actually veiled with an illusion of physicality. And the true nature behind the physical world is really spiritual activity. Everything has its root in a spiritual cause. We just see the mere material manifestation of it. And so, spirituality is not about seeing auras or crystals or manifestation, which are materialistic conceptions. It's much more about having the sensitivity to perceive certain emotions and thoughts. I mean, these things can be part of a healthy life guided by spiritual insight, but it can't replace them. Let's take the example of sleep. You see, the astral body leaves the physical during sleep, and it communes in the spiritual worlds. And the physical body is actually reinvigorated by this activity upon waking. But we're not conscious of this process because it takes a totally different perception. That's where the development of higher cognition comes in. In order to consciously perceive the spiritual world, we would have to develop the organs for higher cognition, or in other words, go through initiation. So the first stage of accessing the higher worlds is called preparation. This consists in cultivating our lives of thoughts and feelings. And through this, the soul world or so-called astral world opens up. We start to see the definite spiritual lines and figures, and they change their forms with the phenomena. So a blossoming flower conjures up a particular line before our souls, while a growing animal or a dying tree gives rise to other lines. The spiritual sight is connected with the phenomena of life and death. So the first step is to direct one's soul towards two different processes: life as it buds grows and flourishes, and death, as it is connected with the withering, fading, and dying away. We have to give ourselves up to these feelings, and we'll notice that after a while, when we look upon certain living or dying things, these definite spiritual lines and figures will show themselves. Whereas in the preparation stage, we develop sight for the spiritual lines and figures, if one hasn't fully integrated this yet, the lines and figures of the spiritual world remain dark. But through the process of illumination, they become light. Through higher organs, one perceives flowing hues and colors such as blue or blue-red from stones, and a red or reddish yellow flowing from animals. The color streaming from plants is green, gradually fading into a light etheric rosy pink. In fact, the colors seen here are spiritual colors. The illumination stage is connected with the soul feelings of the elemental kingdoms, mineral, animal, and plant. And one way of developing this stage is by directing the soul's attention first towards a mineral and then an animal. You'll notice the stone stays peacefully in its place, while the animal is mobile. We notice how it is instinct or desire that moves the animal to change its place. Instincts are also served by the animal's form. Its organs and limbs are shaped by these instincts. Stones, on the other hand, are not shaped by desires, but rather by a force that is without desire. So, two very different kinds of feeling come to life in the soul. One kind streams into the soul from the stone, another from the animal. And when we are able to grasp and integrate these distinct feelings from each of the elemental kingdoms, the spiritual lines and figures that we saw in the preparation stage are illuminated with colors. And then we have initiation, which is our highest level of esoteric training about which our normal language can even communicate. Through initiation, we acquire in this lifetime knowledge and abilities that would have had to be acquired after many, many incarnations in the future. And this stage is broken down into 3 trials. Here, one starts to see and hear the spiritual nature behind all natural phenomena as the veil gets lifted. This is passing through the fire trial, because one, as it were, goes through the process of the spiritual burning away of the veil. In the next trial, one learns to read the Akashic record. Whereas with the fire trial, one started to see and hear with the spiritual eyes and ears, this trial changes the appearance of the figures, colors, and sounds in a very definite way. This is known as the water trial, because when one starts reading the occult script and acting out of higher worlds, it's as if there's no outer support and the ground is taken away from under us, similar to being in water. The last trial doesn't even have a distinct goal, but everything is up to the initiate themselves. Up until now, one always worked from outer motivation or on insights from the shapes, colors, and so on gained in the stages of preparation and illumination. But now, the initiate must rely completely upon oneself and discover one's own higher self or like higher purpose. Listening at every moment to the inspiration of the Spirit in all things is crucial at this point. And since all past support is gone, one must act out of one's own complete impetus. This is known as the air trial because, as it were, you have no more support. You're acting completely out of your own initiative at this point. And with that concludes the initiation stage. However, there's much more detail to each of these stages and trials. I would highly recommend reading Knowledge of Higher Worlds by Rudolf Steiner, which I'll link below. As you can see though, the above stages of preparation, illumination, and initiation are not about doing anything on the physical planes, but it's much more about developing our inner spiritual organs through controlling emotions and thoughts. To come closer though to true spirituality, one must have a real feeling of these things. And in reality, all these stages lie beyond words and concepts and can only truly be grasped experientially. But we do need a shift in how spirituality is seen in modern times, because we won't be able to experience any of how these things go down through purely materialistic conceptions. And it's spiritual science that can provide the impetus for this shift. If you want to learn more about spiritual science, check out my page and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for listening, and until next time.